The wheel of the year has turned at last, conjuring memories up from the past. The mother a circle, the father a line, the journey a spiral as these two combine. As bodies in heaven turn and revolve, so do our spirits as we do evolve. Each year we go around the wheel of the year, we move closer to love and farther from fear. And as the cosmic clock does turn, along our own journeys, we live and we learn. I invite you to come and sit for a spell. The summer breeze has a story to tell about a time at the end of June when the crickets hum a bewitching tune. The summer solstice is on its way, the shortest night and the longest day. A time for tea or wine outdoors on shady porches or sandy shores, for candlelit dinners in the open air and humid breezes frizzing up your hair. The magic of the moment comes when birds sing and crickets hum. The magic is in everything, in the simple moments life will bring. The sun patch that delights the cat, your favorite sundress or old straw hat. The magic is in the patch of daisies, and having permission to just be lazy. The summer solstice is a time of rest, when earth is offering up her best. When desired feelings become habitual, that's the strongest but simplest ritual. Now's the time to relax and receive, and trust that's all you need to achieve. The elements are calling your name, so join them for this little game. Take pleasure in the simple things and see what magic summer brings. The summer solstice, aka Litha or Midsummer, is the longest day and the shortest night of the year. The summer solstice marks the end of the spring and the beginning of the summer season. It's called midsummer because astronomically it's the middle point of the half of the year when the days are longer than the nights. Interestingly though, even though the sun is out for the longest amount of time this week, in many parts of the northern hemisphere, including here in New York, the weather is only just starting to feel like true summer. The days will continue to grow longer, but will also begin to grow shorter after this checkpoint. Therefore, it has the vibe of a high energy celebration while also having a bittersweet undertone. It's a time to relax and be very present in the moment and to give oneself permission to relax. The energy of nature is nearing its peak of life force energy before the heat starts to dry everything out. For many of us, the weather is at its most comfortable this time of year, not too hot or too cold. It's time to cherish the moment and relax into the nurturing energy of nature, to simply be. My favorite themes to focus on during the summer solstice season are the magic of the moment, the inner child, and tween times. The magic of the moment. The summer solstice is a time when nature is usually very forgiving. It's finally easy to relax into the open arms of Mother Nature and be nurtured effortlessly. It's moments like this, when we're at peace outdoors in nature, that it's easiest to attune ourselves fully to the present moment. This can be a deeply connected and magical time. When we're fully immersed in the peace, joy, and simplicity of the moment, that's when time seems to slow down or stand still, giving full attention to the heart-centered part of the experience. The magic of the moment can be evoked intentionally any time of year, but it often occurs spontaneously in these gentle days of summer. Some questions to ask yourself around the magic of the moment. How can I commit to giving myself the time and space to be at peace in nature? Which midsummer activities am I prioritizing in my schedule for this time of year? This spring, I made the decision to really lean into gardening as much as possible this growing season. I'm sitting in my garden right now, and although it was a warm, sunny day earlier, at just the moment when I sat down, the sky opened up and it started to pour. For most of the spring season, I was admittedly lamenting the fact that my balcony is covered by a large awning, because it blocks out all of the afternoon and evening sun from my plants. But now that the summer weather is beginning to set in, I'm remembering just how much of a blessing the awning really is. On days like today, it both makes it possible to tend to my garden in the afternoon without getting roasted by the sun, and it allows me to sit outdoors in the open air when it's thick with the smell of rain. I've successfully created a little bit of a nature haven for myself here, even in spite of it facing a high traffic area and there now being children next door who are almost always outside making a lot of noise. It was actually quite lucky that for the first summer that I lived here, the two patios opposite mine were completely unused. At that time, if the downstairs neighbors weren't making a lot of noise on their porch below me, the only potential distraction from nature was the street and sidewalk traffic, which has tended to be a little bit easier for me to tune out. I knew going into this year that it wasn't going to be as quiet or as private, but rather than letting that discourage me from connecting with Mother Earth consistently, I just made up my mind to balance the elements in a much more strategic way. And the resources I've needed have manifested almost effortlessly so far. I decided early on this spring that if I wanted a quiet moment with nature, so to say, I would utilize any means necessary to curate a tranquil environment for myself, regardless of any outside circumstances. I started by getting very friendly with my earbuds and having a variety of meditative, mood-evoking playlists handy. My other desire was to create a sort of hedge of plants around the two sides of my balcony that are exposed to traffic and neighbors. My initial thought was to just plant tall growing plants and hope for the best, but I recall from earlier gardening experiments that even the plants that are often listed in blogs as privacy fence plants usually take a good little while to get to full size, like sunflowers for example, and who knows if they'll actually be thick enough of a curtain. So I instead set the intention to acquire some plant stands and/or raised beds and trellises to provide a layer of privacy and better utilize the space for planting. Some weeks ago, I happened upon a lightweight wooden shelf, perfect for one of the sides. I used it to get the garden started off with cold-tolerant potted plants late in the spring. And then Matthias offered to build me a bed box for larger food crops. And thankfully, he had stopped me from throwing out my old battered coffee table, which I had left outside for a year, because it turned out that the legs from the table brought the raised bed to just the perfect height. I even decided to try something totally outside of my normal color scheme and paint my gardening containers green, with the intention of emphasizing the theme of the earth element, of course. At first, painting everything green felt really strange, since it's so different from any of the colors currently inside my home. But after a while of getting used to it, it's really started growing on me. I also recently designed a green fairy-themed junk journal for the shop, and the color felt very rich and abundant to myself and everyone else who happened to see it for the short time that it was in my possession. It sold within an hour of being listed, so someone else must have agreed. This is a prime example of how working with the elements in one area of your life can spill over and create rippling positive effects in other areas as well. Working with the actual earth element in its most basic form in the garden has also inspired me in ways that are leading to an easier time attracting money and resources, not to mention a more stable and grounded emotional and spiritual state. For me, the summer solstice is about connecting or reconnecting to the earth element, or all of the elements really, in just some more aligned ways. This year, my desire is to grow more of a green thumb, as well as up-level my eco-friendly living habits in general, in as many ways as possible. The inner child. Being in the present moment is often linked to the inner child, because in these moments of peace and simplicity, it's almost as if the real world and the calm of imagination are one and the same. It's a time of simple enjoyment, of free creative expression, or of simply being. Some questions to ask yourself around the theme of the inner child this season. What is my favorite childhood memory of playing outside in the summertime? What can I do to re-evoke that inner child's sense of joy and wonder into my life this season? The childhood memory that comes to mind isn't one specific memory so much as a chain of memories. I'm thinking of the many times as a child and teenager when I gathered objects to evoke a particular mood and curated a magical scene outdoors. One that's easy to remember is the creative film I made in my teens titled Modern Quaint Nostalgics. I didn't realize it at the time, but what I was essentially doing was crafting altars to honor and celebrate my sacred creativity and inspiration. This became apparent when this practice seamlessly found its way into the early days of my witchy business owner journey, when I first began designing scenes for product photo shoots for my journals. When I first dreamed up the idea for my first handcrafted grimoire diary, I had access to a large yard, and so the natural thing to do was to utilize the space for epic photography setups. Honestly, I do believe part of the reason my journal shop took off was because of the enchanting mood that I was able to evoke with those outdoor photo shoots. Because I myself was so inspired in that outdoor environment, it effortlessly translated into images that took the viewer to a magical place, perhaps engaging their own inner child. And that's exactly the kind of vibe that I intend to re-evoke into my life again on a more consistent basis. Part of my reason for prioritizing creating this safe space for myself on my balcony now is that I desire to have that creative connection with the outdoors again, even if it's just on a slab of floating concrete hanging above a busy street. As I recall, there were times in my early childhood when I lived in really busy areas that kind of felt energetically draining to me, but some of my favorite childhood memories from that time are also of choosing to make the most of our tiny inner city yards to set up little scenes of cats and rabbits and daisies and ponies and unicorns and tea parties and all of the magical things. It was this exact same notion of re-evoking that childhood practice of creating playful altars that went into the shoot I did for my recently sold Green Fairy Junk Journal, and I'm sure that's part of why it sold so quickly. So perhaps my intention this summer is to get into that creative inner childlike energy as often as possible, and not to forget to include my career projects in that intention. After all, long before I ever got the idea that it was my job to fix the problems of the world by learning and teaching shadow work, self-development, and manifestation, I always knew my purpose was simply to inspire people with my natural sense of childlike magic, inspiration, and storytelling. This is why in the past few years I've pivoted from focusing mainly on coaching and serious educational content to more junk journaling and creative cinematography. Because I've come back home to myself and remembered that at the end of the day, The whole point of starting on a mindfulness journey in the first place was to create the space to experience more joy in life. And rather than telling the world about it, I've begun to let my inner child lead again and show the power of magic through my most authentic form of expression, art. Oh, and by the way, part of this resolution has been to make more of these adorable fairy-themed junk journals because my inner child really seems to enjoy them. If you were inspired by the one that I showed off in this video, I invite you to check the link in the description to see if there's another similar one available in the shop now. Tween Times. Many will agree that these magic of the moment experiences are often times when we will feel the presence of the inner child. Some relate this childlike sense of wonder with fairy energy or with being visited by the muses. For many, these types of purely inspirational moments often occur during tween times. Tween times are the natural occurrences in which consciousness is shifting to transition from one chapter into the next. The duality of the transition triggers us into a hyper-aware state, and these tend to be some of our most vivid and enchanting memories for the rest of our lives. All of the checkpoints on the Wheel of the Year are tween times in a sense, and this one is a really potent one. Another example of a tween time is a beautiful sunset. The summer solstice is a tween time in the sense that it's the pause between the days of waxing and waning sunlight, just as a sunset is the sacred pause between day and night. Some questions to ask yourself around the theme of tween times this summer solstice season. What does this term tween time mean to me? What are examples of tween times I remember in my life? Interestingly, when I think about it, I recall that my entire current life path and career is based on what started as a natural fascination with tween times. Long before calling myself a witch or knowing anything at all about neo-paganism or the Wheel of the Year, my childhood self was absolutely obsessed with the transient moments in nature. Some of my earliest memories of the outdoors are related to things like the first yellow leaf of autumn, the first snowflake of winter, the first blossoms of spring, and the magical sunsets of summer. I always felt myself being drawn to any media in which nature, elements, and seasons were depicted as magical. And because the religion I grew up in didn't celebrate Christmas, Halloween, or any of the other pop culture seasonal holidays, I had to get my fix of these types of things in somewhat more obscure ways. I recall seeing the small printed words, autumn equinox or winter solstice, on my wall calendars, and finding myself counting down the days until the seasonal transitions arrived, feeling somehow that they were what I would now call sacred. One story that inspired me so much as a child was Catkin by Antonia Barber. It was featured in an American Girl magazine in the 90s, and I loved it so much that I've saved the pages even until today, long after most of my other childhood belongings are gone. Obviously, there was a cat and fairy tale vibes involved, so I had to love it. But something else that fascinated me about it was that it incorporated the transition of seasons into its enchanting storyline. In the story, it says of the little people who stole the child and left a changeling in its place. When the summer nights grow long under the green hill, they grow restless and long for new company. There was a great banquet to mark the turning of the year, when the days begin to lengthen and the nights grow shorter. After the feasting, the riddles begin. This piqued my interest, and from then on, any mention of solstices and equinoxes amused me. So naturally, in my early teens, when my little sister brought home the Spiderwick Chronicles from her friend's house, I made up my mind that I was not too old for it. The both of us always loved the fairy energy evoked by that story, and after reading it, those autumn sunsets when leaves seem to flutter to the ground in slow motion became all the more celebratory for us. We also discovered the Hallmark Artisan film adaptation of The Snow Queen, which even further emphasized the importance of seasons, solstices, and equinoxes, solidifying it in my mind that these were magical times. And so, in due course in my 20s, when I was finally able to explore other spiritual paths, I circled back around to wondering what other cultures had gleaned about such things. And when I did discover the Wheel of the Year, I was hooked right then and there, and as you know, the rest is history. There's just something so deeply enchanting and natural about recognizing how the hands of the great cosmic clock move, and ritualizing it in some meaningful way as each year passes. It both shows us the eternal continuity of consciousness, while also offering us periodic opportunities to mark the beginnings and ends of cycles in our own development. It gives us the ability to close old doors behind us and step through new ones, all while also inviting us to utilize traditions, rites, and rituals to help us remember and appreciate where we've been and how far we've come. And tween time energy isn't limited to just seasonal checkpoints or holidays. My sister and I always made some sort of tradition out of drinking tea, listening to our favorite music, reading each other our favorite stories, and processing our journeys thus far on the last nights before a big change, like becoming a teenager, moving house, or leaving for college. I recall one New Year's Eve in my very early teens when I decided to forego my older sister's New Year's Eve party downstairs in favor of creating what I would now call an altar on my bedside table. Though even then I knew that New Year's Eve was a man-made holiday, I still sensed that it was a transitional time of season, and I decided that it was important to light a candle and write in my diary about what I was leaving behind in the old year and what I was calling forth for the new year. All of these simple transient moments have the power to become intention-setting rituals, rituals to savor the present moment, and celebrations of endings and beginnings. So, what are your favorite things about the summer solstice season? Are you planning to journal on any of the topics from this video? If so, I would love to invite you to join me for a seasonal journaling adventure this summer. Here are 2 different ways. First, you can just download the printable PDF files of the grimoire pages you saw in this video from my Writing Wish shop. Your download will include all of the summer solstice information discussed in this video, minus the parts that are my personal responses to the prompts, of course, and plus space for you to write about your personal relationship with the season. You also get access to 4 different printing options: color and black and white. The black and white option is great if you want to save on ink and decorate the pages yourself, and full page binder sheets and a smaller folded book template for junk journaling. You get to print these out as many times as you want for your own personal use. So, for example, if you decide to go for binder pages in color this year for an instant option, you can. And then next year, if you decide you want to get more crafty with your journal, you can print out the junk journal templates instead. Doing these same journal prompts each year in different journals or as binder refill pages has helped me and so many of my Writing Witch members to up-level our capacity to experience fulfillment each year. And I want you to experience this as well. Are you also looking to connect with kindred spirits and other magical mavens as you learn to embody your most fulfilling version of yourself this season? If so, I would also love to invite you to join me on Patreon. If you choose to join any tier by June 30th, 2022, you'll get access to at least the 8.5 by 11 binder style sheets. And if you choose to support me at a higher tier, you can access all of the different printables for the summer solstice, including writing pages and journaling ephemera and more, and/or access to my full course on how to manifest your most fulfilling summer. In our Patreon community, we're going to be doing some fun seasonal challenges, as well as just connecting with our kindred spirits weekly with discussion prompts. So I hope to see you there. Either way, have an amazing summer solstice season, and for more inspiration, I invite you to check out this playlist right here.